Today, we're sitting down with someone whose career is as hilarious as it is groundbreaking, Krystyna Hutchinson. And if you haven't heard of Christina yet, you're in for a treat. She's an internationally touring stand-up comedian, actress, and author who's appeared in some of the biggest platforms from Comedy Central, Netflix, NBC, and even the Joe Rogan Experience.
The biggest platform.
The biggest platform. Controversial.
Very.
There's pre-COVID Joe Rogan and there was post-COVID.
I was pre.
But Christina isn't just about making people laugh. She's a trailblazer who's helped reshape conversations around sexuality and feminism in ways that are as insightful as they are entertaining. Christina is perhaps best known as one half of the wildly popular podcast, Guys We Fucked. The anti-slut shaming podcast, which she co-hosts with her comedy bestie, Corinne Fisher. This podcast isn't just another comedy show, it's a bold, unapologetic exploration of sex, relationships, and the societal norms that often stifle us. With millions of downloads and listeners around the world, Christina has become a voice for those who are tired of shame and ready to own their stories. But that's just scratching the surface. Christina's work has been featured in Vogue, Vanity Fair, Cosmopolitan, and beyond. She's taken the stage at TEDx to talk about the power of owning your narrative, and her debut stand-up album, Good Girl Barbara, is just another example of her fearless approach to comedy. So whether you're a longtime fan or new to her world, get ready for a conversation that's as deep as it is funny. Let's welcome the incredibly talented Krystyna Hutchinson to the show, everybody.
What an intro. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow. I felt like I was at my funeral when I got to hear the speech in person. That's great. Thank you for having me.
So it's funny is we met because you came to the very first fan.
Yes.
You were at the very first fan with one of our mutual friends.
Stephen Jenkins. Oh boy.
Shout out Third Eye Blind.
Shout out. Yes.
And so it's funny, it's so apropos that you would be here at the last fan ever. As soon as we get canceled after this episode.
No, I won't put you through that.
So, for a lot of these artist talks, I really want to take it from the beginning, take it from the very top. What did you have for breakfast?
What did I have for breakfast, Colin?
Sweet or savory?
I think it was savory. You had breakfast, I didn't. Oh. I forget what I had. I think I had, oh my God. I know what I had for dinner. I had a great salad. Oh God, there's seeds. There was just a bunch of crap in it. It was great. I forget what I had for breakfast.
In all seriousness, so, we know you as a comedian, but where are you from? Like, what was your childhood like?
Ooh. It was bad. That's why I do this. I that's how you get an artist, huh? Well, childhood trauma. Yeah, I'm actually very passionate about childhood trauma if you want to dive into that. But
How is processing?
Oh, yeah. And so I was from outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, grew up there, and childhood was pretty rough. Mother with depression, dad who didn't talk about feelings. They're lovely humans. I don't speak to them anymore, but like they put me through the ringer, and it was one of those things. I feel like when you have parents that are mentally ill, you either go one of two ways. It's messed up, and you're like, I don't know what's happening here, but it's you. And then eventually put the pieces together. Or the other path is like, I'm responsible for your well-being. Don't worry, Nancy, I got you. So I took that route. So it was a very stressful childhood.
And somehow you were able to transmute all that stress into laughter.
Yes, you got it. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. And I also cry every day.
I'm crying and laughing right now.
That's great. Wow, you shed no tears. It's beautiful.
As you were growing up, what were some of like the biggest influences for you creatively? Like, what were you drawn to?
Gilda Radner. Gilda Radner was in the 1975 cast of Saturday Night Live, which is one of the best casts of Saturday Night Live, the very first one. And she was an example of a grown woman that was childlike, and I'm very childlike. And so I was like, oh, you don't have to grow up? Fuck yeah.
I don't want to grow up.
No.
We're Toys R Us kids.
Yeah, you're like an adult, but like this is it's like if a kid had money, like this space, which is my favorite. That's my favorite vibe.
Or many roommates.
Yes, that too.
There's like 10 people living in this house.
Oh, really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Is it just you that lives in this house?
Definitely not.
Oh, okay. I was like, damn, boo.
You know, you were talking about like growing up and Gilda Radner being an early influence. When did you first realize you had this passion for making people laugh? Like, you grew up watching Gilda Radner.
Yeah.
You laughed a lot.
I did. I laughed. I laughed a lot. I cried a lot. And when you have a parent with depression, when they laugh, you're like, oh, everything's okay. They're happy. We're all good. For this 10 seconds in time, everything is perfect. So I kind of lived for those moments that my parents were happy, and it filled me with a lot of joy. And so I just kept chasing that and chasing that.
They were your first audience.
Yeah, they were. And they were a good audience because we weren't easy to laugh when they were depressed. So you really had to try hard.
Yeah. Tough crowd.
Very tough crowd.
Yeah. You know, when you started making your parents laugh, like, how did you think about transitioning from, okay, making my parents laugh to making other people laugh to, hey, maybe I can just make people laugh?
Yeah. So I always wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. That was my initial vision. I went to Penn State my first year of college, and it was heavenly. It was such a great year. And then I realized in the middle of the semester that you can intern at Saturday Night Live. They have interns, but you have to be going to college in New York to intern there. And I was like, well, if I get an in there, I'm going to be charming. I'm going to show up early. I'm going to leave late. I'm going to have a great attitude. I'm going to give everybody coffee. So I was like, I have to move to New York. And I did. And I interviewed for SNL 4 times. And no one quits. When you have an internship at SNL, you don't stop interning. So the woman felt so bad for me. And I was like, okay. The last semester of my college career, she called me and she was like, no one left the program. So I'm so sorry, but we can't give you the internship. And I was like, well, if anybody decides to quit, I guess call me. And she called me 20 minutes later. I think she felt bad. And she was like, just come in Tuesdays and Saturdays. We'll figure it out. I'm like, it was the best day of my life.
That's amazing.
And then the last day of that internship, interns weren't allowed to go to the after party because one time one of them fucked Jeremy Piven and that was our fault apparently. So obviously it's the intern's fault, so we can't go.
Check on the guys we fucked.
No. So we would go to the after parties, which started at 3:30 a.m. And I stayed up so, I don't know how, no drugs, just excitement. I'm like, damn, that's to be 22 again, huh?
Yeah.
And the last episode of that season, there was one big after party on the ice skating rink. So the interns could go. It was the only one we could go to. And I got wasted and I just got the balls to go up to one of the writers. And I was like, what do you got to do to get on the show? And he's an improv guy, it's John Lutz. He was in 30 Rock. And he was like, you gotta do stand-up. I'm like, oh, that sucks. I really thought he was gonna say improv. So I did it. That was the beginning of a very long 11 years.
So just rewind real quick. So you're in college, and were you writing at the time? Were you doing improv? You weren't doing stand-up?
No, I went to college for acting. I wasn't doing stand-up yet because it didn't dawn on me to do stand-up until he said that the last semester of my college career. So I just went into it right away. Because when you graduate, you're like, I got it. Like the belief I had in myself was a lot. It was a lot of belief, and I have to remind myself every couple of years, like, you still have that. Like, use it. You know, really lean into anything can happen. Because that's what got me here in the first place. So you forget when you get older.
Amen to that.
It's just, you're like, oh yeah, I used to be like fun and happy. Let's bring that back.
And so, okay, you're John Lutz gives you this advice.
Yeah.
I got to do stand up.
Yep.
And so at that point, you're like.
So I did a bringer show, which if you do anybody did stand up here, I didn't do an open mic. You're supposed to do an open mic. Don't do a bringer show. A bringer show is when you go to a comedy club and they totally scam you. They have you do 5 minutes, but you have to beg like 6 or 7 friends to pay $25 a ticket and a 2-drink minimum to see, and they're all broke and you're broke, and just to see you bomb for 5 minutes, and then maybe Jerry Seinfeld will come, you know, and wash their sorrows away about it. But the first ever bringer show I did, my first internship in New York was with Corinne Fisher, my comedy partner now, her company. So when I had my bringer show, I was like, do you want to come? I need people really bad. And she's like, okay. And then she asked to work together after that. So that was like that was the best part of me moving here, was meeting her.
Wait, so you met her at one of your first shows ever?
I interned for her company. So when I was trying to get that SNL internship, I was going after all these interviews just to have something on my resume that by the time I got to SNL, they'd be like, wow, we have to hire her. And so my first internship was with a talent management company called Lehman Entertainment, and Corinne was one of the 3 people who worked there.
And that's how you met Corinne, who would then go on to be your
My comedy wife.
Yes.
Yes.
Comedy wife, comedy life.
Oh yeah, we've been through a lot. Boy, oh boy.
Funny wife, funny life.
Yes, happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
But we're both the wife, so we're both real happy.
What was it like? At what point were you like, okay, I'm gonna transition from aspiring to doing this full time for you?
Guys We Fuck got way bigger than we were good at stand-up. Like, we were 3 years into stand-up, and Corinne got dumped by a guy that she thought was the love of her life at the time. And I'm sure we've all been through this, a breakup, or we've had a friend that has been through a breakup that they are a puddle on the floor for a very long time. You lose 10 pounds in 2 days, your tongue's gray. Like, this is the kind of thing she was going through. And her and I are very much like, you have a big feeling, let's make art out of it. And so she's like, what if we just have a podcast? And this is when it wasn't video for podcast. And we just interview all the guys we fucked, and we'll just call it Guys We Fucked. I'm like, yes, we shall do that.
That's brilliant.
And it took off immediately. And I was like, holy shit, this is really cool. And so we had to get really good at stand-up really quick. Because when you're 3 years into comedy, unless you're like a prodigy like Hannibal Buress, you're not that good yet. So, and also I was 25 when it started. So, we started touring and selling out and just bombing on stage for a half hour with the words that you wrote and you're delivering them. And the audience is like, that'll build grit.
Can we talk about those like early struggles for a second? Because I feel
Absolutely.
like for so many of us in the room, as aspiring or even just as artists right now and creatives, it's not always going to go our way. We're gonna have a bad performance here and there.
Yeah.
How do you get through those early struggles and get to the other side?
Yeah, you cry. Oh, I'm a crier. I remember one time, the hardest. Well, God, there's like 5 I can recall, like the worst bombs of my life. When we say bomb, we mean a comedian did very, very poorly. And one of them was when I met my manager, who I work with still, but he put together a show at Caroline's so that I could do a set, and he had the whole company come down, and I'm a couple years in, and it's 6:45 in the afternoon. I'm like, this is not a time for comedy. And I wasn't, I was nervous, and the crowd, I had like dick jokes, just low-hanging fruit kind of stuff, and the crowd was like 65 to 75. I'm like, they hated me. Oh, they hated me so bad. And I had to do the rest of the set, and I didn't talk for 48 hours. I was like, I'm gonna be alone for a while to process this. I didn't even say hi to him. I was like, it was so embarrassing, but for some reason, being embarrassed, it feels awful, but I'm not afraid of it at all. So thank God, because I have merch that says congrats on not killing yourself. Like, I really mean that.
Wow. So back to the podcast. So you meet Corinne, and you guys were like, let's just launch this podcast as a side hobby to the comedy. And then it instantly takes off.
Yeah.
Like, walk us through that journey. Like, what did it take? This is like on some level your first big break.
Oh, Jesus. Right? Yes. And every comedian that we had respected knew who we were. That was the craziest part. Like, the comics that we were like, you are one of my favorite brilliant minds. They would come up to us, love the podcast. I'm like, oh God. The amount of press we got was absolutely crazy. All of the things that you read in the credits, that's before we had a press person. So we got way more press in that first 5 years. We got the TED Talk, all of this stuff. Our inbox was never quiet. And we just had TV opportunities immediately. And of course they want to take you and do it a reality show and have you fight and then have you like make out. Like, so it wasn't one of the cool things about working with my comedy partner, Corinne, is she is so comfortable saying no. Oh, she's so good at it. And I was so terrified of saying no. And we would be on phone calls where they would pitch us something that was ultimately degrading if you zoom back. But I was just so happy to have a phone call that I was like, okay. And Corinne would say no to their face, and I would get like embarrassed. And then as the years go on, I'm like, oh, she's right. She's correct. Saying no is really powerful to an opportunity that doesn't speak to you, because it's the ego, man. Ego kills talent. And so you really have to check it along the way. And luckily I was bombing the first 5 years the podcast was popular. It's stand-up, so my ego was always checked. It was checked.
It's so funny how that works. the podcast as it's taking off, like looking back now that you're able to sort of see the trajectory, what would you say were the elements, if you will, that contributed to making it such a successful thing within the first, year or 2 years?
Yeah, I would.
If you were to reverse engineer it, if you will.
Right. It's a conversation between two friends that you feel like you're a fly on the wall for. And that was something when you marry that with something like sex and a young 20-something in New York City, just kind of very openly talking about it, and then interviewing. We interviewed at the beginning guys that we fucked. Really awkward conversations, but really interesting. I was interested in it because I'm like, I would go to the grave without talking to you again. And we did learn about ourselves. We learned about the type of person we were in the relationship that maybe we missed. But I think just the honesty, the thing that really surprised me early on was we started on SoundCloud. And that was like our hosting platform. And we would get all these comments. And then some of them were really funny. Some of them were like, you whore. And we were reading them because we thought they were hilarious. But then people started asking for advice. And so we would answer the questions. And then just floodgates absolutely opened. And then people started telling us about real dark stuff that has happened under the umbrella of sexuality and being a woman. And I was like, oh, fuck. And we were able to find this way to find humor appropriate to the situation that was super cathartic. My eyes were open to so many issues from doing the podcast.
Yeah, it's like, you guys are known for almost like challenging societal norms around sexuality. What were some of the most crazy, impactful stories or experiences for you on the show?
Yeah, so there's one that comes to mind. It's a dark one, but dark shit happens because it's planet Earth. I remember when we started having people email us instead of leaving SoundCloud comments. I remember one time I was in the grocery store. This was maybe 2 or 3 years into the show. And I was so fascinated by these emails because they were really deep, detailed, intricate, gut-wrenching stories or funny stories, or just like, I'm so honored that you shared that with us. That means a lot. We had this window into humanity. I'm like, does anybody else know that like everyone's getting sexually assaulted? Like it was crazy. The things that people would tell us. But there was one email that we got, and I remember I was in the grocery store and I almost I had to just sit still for a second. It was a woman, and this is an intense one. She told us that when she was a child, she was, for her 10th birthday, her father organized a gang rape on her. And he had been sexually assaulting her for a number of years. She escaped. She got adopted, and she lived this beautiful life. And I remember we read that email. We didn't read it. I was too scared to read it on the podcast because I was like, I was not exposed to that level of shit that can go wrong for people in this world. And so we read
That's
it.
That's another name for a podcast, shit that can go wrong.
Oh, this is everything. Yeah, you should do that. And we read it where we summarized it because we were like, whoa, that's really dark. Like, how do you recover from that? And she emailed us back because she heard us read it or summarize it. And she was like, I'm good. Like, I'm doing really good. I'm in therapy. And I'm like, man, I ain't shit. Like, the human spirit is the most resilient thing on this planet. The things that people survive I'm so honored to first be here, but know people.
Yeah.
Because people's stories, I think, are our most valuable pieces of inspiration for art, for everything, for life, to how to live your life. I could hear people's stories forever.
Yeah, and it's crazy because, the podcast starts off as this, humorous kind of concept.
Yeah.
And then you're getting these really dark topics.
Yeah.
And so how do you approach and, address these dark topics and find, humor in a way that still, honors the gravity of the situation?
Trial and error, because we were so young when we started getting these emails that I was like, oh, damn. And I knew, I had some tough, my mom, basically, how I summarize it is she used suicide as a manipulation tactic. So that's where my headspace kind of came from. And so, but the more I hear people's really, really intense stories, I'm like, oh, we are amongst the planet of fucking survivors. Wait, what was your question? I lost it.
It was, sometimes you're just seeing so much dark shit.
Oh, right.
And how are you able to find humor
okay.
and do it in such a way that still honors the gravity of
so I
the
think
weight of it?
that evolved over time. But I think when someone tells you something really intense, which I still do on the street, on the subway, in email, in Instagram DM, and you just go, holy shit, like that's awful. Then you hear them and you see them and you're there for, and that changes, like that opens up the space for people to then be able to, they joke about it. Like I invite them to joke about it. I don't like, I'll follow your lead. You know what I mean? Like if you want to do it, cool. If not, I totally get it. But to me, the most like, it's like almost better than sex. When you can laugh at something that has caused you so much terror and trauma and grief, and you could turn it around and laugh at it, it's like a time warp. I've never felt anything like it. Like being able to laugh at your pain, but you have to be in control of the joke. There's all these kind of specifications around it. But like when you can really lead that charge for yourself, it's potent in healing.
It's interesting to see the pod evolve over a decade now, which is kind of crazy to say.
Yeah.
From starting as something that's just two friends having off-the-cuff conversations to tackling these bigger subjects and so much more. When you look back on the last 10 years of the pod, how have you seen it evolve? Where do you sort of see it going next?
Oh, I really love how it's evolved, and it's totally on accident. We just kind of wrote. The one thing that we've been consistent about is we want to do interviews and talk about things that we are interested in and we are intrigued by, and we're really lucky because you cannot choose your fans. They come to you, and they're just incredible people. They're the best. Like I was in Amsterdam with my boyfriend, and there was a bunch of people on the street like Christina, and I talked to them, and they were so dope. Like I was like, damn, this is such an honor. So we get introduced to guests, to topics, to stories from the fans, and we kind of follow that as well as what Corinne and I are each going through. And so for me, I did a thing. I basically like realized I was traumatized, like on a podcast, like on air, like over the course of a number of years. My mom was on the podcast. We interviewed her as a guest, and that was
just processing your trauma in public.
Yeah, because it's the hot thing to do, huh? And there was a year where I was like CPTSD was what I was diagnosed with, and like I would have temper tantrums as an adult woman, like in public to strangers. The behavior was really rough, and my comedy partner is a very confident person. She knows who she is. She knows what she wants. She knows how to navigate any tricky situation. She's like, let's go. I got this. And I am not like that at all. And so, I had to kind of learn how to process, how to act like an adult woman on the show. It's a wild ride. But luckily, there's also people going through similar things. So it's nice to at least hear stories to say that helped. But man, wilding out on a microphone is not cute.
Speaking of temper tantrums, 2016 election, I read that was a really impactful moment for you.
We really thought she was going to win.
Yeah, in terms of having to almost like step up and use your platform to, play a role in the feminist movement.
Yeah.
When you look at, here we are 8 years later, and we've got another election coming up, and we've got these.
Shit's gotten worse, by the way.
Yeah.
Like in terms like women in Texas can't, like if their fallopian tube is exploding and they're pregnant, the doctor won't see them. Like the wait. I'm like, what?
Crazy shit.
What is happening? Texas is another planet.
And so now, here we are 8 years later, in a very similar situation.
Yeah.
How do you sort of see your role today, 8 years later, versus 2016?
Just speaking our own truth. That's it. That's all I ever want from an artist is just like, what are you feeling now? What are you going through? I think certain things like when you have an audience, I think you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't a little bit. Like when the stuff happened with in Israel, then not in Palestine and not. I had very strong opinions about it, but I didn't share them on a sex podcast, and it really, humanity really, really gets me. But so I would share those feelings, somewhere else because this is a sex show, and so stuff like the election, that's pretty relevant because it has to do with gender and being a woman in the world and all the difficulties that you can face with that. But yeah, you get like people get really pissed when you don't speak up, and this is the trauma response in me. I'm like, I can fucking say whatever I want. It's like, oh God, Christina, shut the fuck up. Don't yell back at people. Don't yell back at people. Be an adult. Come on. So that's been, but in terms of our role, I think our role is just talking about how we feel. And then I love hearing other people's opinions on what they feel and why. I love opposing opinions because I'm curious. And you just approach everything with curiosity. That to me, because I have a temper, that's the surefire way to avoid the temper. Just be curious about where they're coming from.
No, I love that approaching it with curiosity versus judgment.
Yeah, because every person's actions and opinions and thoughts and words that they say, it's a culmination of every moment of their individual life, from the moment they came out of their mother's womb to now, whenever they're saying the thing. If you think about it that way, like, they have their own perspective and their own story and their own scars. So, like, shut the fuck up and listen. I'm saying that to me.
Yeah. So, in addition to the podcast, you've done a number of other things. On some level, the podcast has become an incredible platform, not just for, helping change the social narrative with things like the election, but also for other aspects of your career. You've launched a stand-up comedy album, Good Girl Barbara, and it's interesting to hear that you initially started trying to do stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
The podcast happened, then you did the podcast, but you were still doing stand-up comedy in parallel, and now you have you released your first stand-up comedy album.
Yes, it's a long
How did
time
that come
coming.
about, and when?
It's just, I was late in the game, been doing stand-up for a decade. You should have had an album out by now, but and so I was like, I need to get something on tape. With stand-up, when social media started taking off, it was, after we started stand-up, and I don't like putting clips of my stand-up online because I like you to hear the joke when I'm on stage for the first time, but you're done as a comic. Like, if you're not online posting clips, you don't sell tickets. So I'm slowly getting used to that. But yeah, it was a long time coming, and itty bitty titty community. Hell yeah, celebrate all the titties. Every titty is the shit.
Hyper
Itty bitty titties, big titties, medium ass titties. I love titties. Pillowy titties, long titties, short titties. Big nipples. Let's just name all the tits we've seen.
All the titties. Still waiting for my first ones. Yeah. Just kidding.
LOL. There you go.
Oh,
That's very sweet.
Anybody else?
Oh, tread lightly, my friend. You gonna get yourself canceled.
That's how fam ends. The first and last guest.
So
Yeah. What were we talking about before?
I don't know. Talk about ghosts?
Stand-up comedy has changed so much with social media.
Yeah.
It used to be you can't bring a phone, you can't bring your camcorder to the, you can't bring your VHS.
Yeah.
You can't bring your phone to a comedy show.
Dave Chappelle started a real great trend that I am a fan of. Putting the phone in the pouch, yeah.
Yeah, put the phone in the pouch.
Yeah.
You've been in the business for quite a while now, and you've seen the TikTok revolution.
Oh boy. Yeah.
How have you seen stand-up comedy specifically, evolve because of social media?
Well, I think when you post jokes on social media, they're short and they're punchy, and they're set up punchline, or it's like a 2-camera rant. But so then when you get in the comedy club, I've noticed a couple comics that say like they got really big on TikTok, and then they go to the clubs to do a headline weekend. The audiences, their attention span is really short. Like, give me the clips, the TikTok clips. Like, you can't scroll through this set.
You can't swipe
Real
through
life.
the comedians.
Right. So they've found a little trouble there. But yeah, I just think comedy is. I felt like after the pandemic, during the pandemic, I'm like, I think stand-up comedy is going to be really. It's already a big art form. It was already a pretty popular one, but I think it was going to get much bigger after the pandemic because we're like, we're all fucking nuts. Like, we're all crazy, and we're going to be craving intellectual stimulation. So it's great, but you get more people filming things and more people putting things online, and sometimes people don't like the jokes, and that's great. That's okay, And so the comic is always weary. I know a bunch of comics are scared to put certain jokes out. They just want to do it in the comedy club because Instagram is not a stand-up comedy club audience. But so it's been interesting to see a bunch of my colleagues just skyrocket from TikTok clips. I'm like, good for you, dude. That's great. Look at you go.
I'm so curious that, like so much of comedy is about managing surprise. And when
Yep.
all of your jokes are out there, how do
That's
you...
what I'm saying. So I don't post. Thank you. I'm gonna tell my
know,
manager you said that. Yeah, he
we-
tells
we-
me every day.
I went with a friend to the Comedy Cellar last year for his birthday, and I'll be the first to admit, like, one of the things I did was try to figure out, okay, who's performing,
Yeah.
and then you go see their clips online,
Yeah.
etc. Right? Thankfully, Comedy Cellar doesn't like actually show you who's performing, so you can't do that ahead of time. But
Yeah.
That's not the norm, right?
Right.
And so, like, as a comedian, how much of your stand-up has to incorporate improv, which is a big part of your background as well,
Yeah.
to keep things fresh.
Yeah, a lot. Like at the top, I'll do crowd. I only do crowd work on men because I like I love making fun of men, and you guys are great sports. And so
We're an easy target.
you are so easy.
Low
and
hanging
like
fruits.
you know what what if I'm digging in on you, they know what I'm saying is right, and they're like, yeah, it's enjoyable for everybody. And the element of surprise, as you were saying, very important thing in comedy. So obviously crowd work is going to be something that's just pure, like, what's going to happen. It could go wrong, it could go great. But yeah, I think, yeah, I do talk to the audience a little bit, but then I'm like, all right, now it's my turn because I wrote 20 minutes, so I'm gonna tell it to you now.
Speaking of writing, you've also written a book
Yes.
with your partner, correct?
Yes.
Called Fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. What was that writing process like, and how did it differ from the podcast experience, from the stand-up comedy experience, or how was it a synthesis of all these diverse experiences?
It was definitely a synthesis of all of the experiences. We had an outline for the book that we pitched, and Harper One was like, "We love it, great." Gave us an offer. We were like, "Okay, hell yeah!" And we went to write the book separately. We sat down at our individual apartments, and we totally ditched the outline without telling the other person. And Corinne happened to write all about how to be self-confident, and I happened to write about how to advocate for yourself sexually and like go on sexual adventures with your partner and how fun it can be and how it's not scary to talk about. So the book that ended up happening was not at all the book we pitched, but it's way better. I will say the book came out, I forget, 2016 or something. So the book dedication, the 4 out of 5 people that I listed in that book dedication are blocked on my cell phone. So man, people change. I got a matching tattoo with one of them. I was raised by 2 of them. The other one I dated and he sued me. It just, wow, you just really don't know where life's gonna go. You really don't know. You don't know. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You're always up to something new. What are you working on now? What are some of your current projects? I also know you're into mediumship and the afterlife.
Yes.
You have so many diverse interests.
COVID, man, got me into so much weird shit.
What kind of weird, wacky stuff?
Dude, I've taken classes with mediums. So mediumship is when you talk to people who passed away. And I feel like there's got to be people here. Every time I talk about it, somebody in the vicinity is like, holy shit, this thing happened to me. And I love hearing those stories. I live for those stories. And they're insane. So there was a show on Netflix called Surviving Death. It's a docuseries. Totally. I was like, what the fuck? Why are we fucking talking about this every day? Well, I don't care about Donald Trump. Like, you can talk to your grandpa that died that you miss. Like, that is crazy. So I had to look into it because I am, if I am anything, I am a curious person. And if something sparks my interest, I want to figure it out. And so I started taking mediumship classes, and I saw Laura Lynn Jackson, who's in this docuseries, do a reading on the doc, and I've seen her do readings in real life. I've taken so many workshops since then. I have watched families. She does these 90-person readings in Long Island, and it's all grieving families. And I'm not trying to connect with anybody who's died. I just think it is the most healing, immediately potent thing I've ever witnessed. It's like in those movie scenes where they're at a church and a boy in a wheelchair comes up and the priest like touches him and he's like, I can walk. That's what I saw. And so there was this one moment where there was a woman at the reading she came in and she was so angry. And I was like, whew, she was carrying a lot. And so she ended up coming with her son. And Laura, it's a gallery reading, so she just reads, whoever she's pulled to. And so she ended up with this woman, and she's like, your son's here. He ended up dying of a drug overdose in her home. And she has been trying to get him to get clean, and was so mad that she did not intervene when he was ODing in her home. And of course, right? And Laura, who's this very sweet woman, she was like, if you would have saved him, he would have died the next day. Like, this was a part of it. This was a part of the path. And I was like, gee, and you're watching this woman like, whew, just waterworks. And she's like, you're missing out on this, your son who was with her, her second surviving son. You're missing out on his life because you are so consumed with this. You have to let this go. He is okay. He needs you to move on. And she said all these specific things that I didn't know anything about, but I looked at her and you could tell she was like, how do you fucking know that? I watched this woman go from so angry that she was like scary to be near to her face changed. She had hope in her face and she was happy and she was laughing. And I'm like, the rest of that woman's life is going to be better because she got that. This is such a we are in a world of so much fuckery, and so much pain that I'm like, if that is available, we need to be spreading the word about that. Obviously there's people that like say they're mediums and aren't, and so that's a different category, but the real ones do exist and I've seen it, and it was life-changing to watch.
How do you sort of see yourself incorporating that into your
I'm going to save it for like my 60s and 70s because I feel like, yes, people save for retirement, but I'm going to like have careers for when I'm like older so that like my 70s are going to be fucking fun, man. Could you imagine just like helping people heal by like talking to their passed away relative and getting like, that would be so cool. So
guys, we've healed.
Yes. Beautiful.
That's the pod we need.
Yeah.
A lot of guys need a lot of healing.
Yeah.
And
yes.
a lot of loving.
Yes. Yep. But healing first.
Looking back, on your career now, like, how do you think your work has evolved from where you've started, and what's changed in your approach or perspective?
Good question. I didn't know who I was until like 5 years ago. It was all a mask. And when you realize it was all a mask, you're like, oh, damn, the whole time, like everything was a mask, huh? You got to grieve that. And sometimes you grieve it in public. That's very embarrassing. But if you could survive it, ooh, wow, you really come out the other side with no fucks. And so I'm realizing one thing I'm accepting about myself that I guess I pushed to the side. I am so sensitive. I can't, like, people that are mean, I can't, like, it really is hard. And there's so many mean people. Oh, Jesus, they're so fucking mean. And so...
Could you ever read the mean tweets?
Oh my God, they would kill me. Reddit threads? Get the fuck out of here. Like, they would wreck me. But now I know enough to, like, like that, comments about me now I don't care. Because I'm like, you're just hurting and, like, you deserve help, But...
Easy healing.
Yeah, but, like, the way... we see in the news, on the street, whatever, people treating each other, it's really tough. And so it makes me so mad. And so I talk about that now. Mm-hmm. Like, guys, stop being pieces of shit.
Yeah. Facts.
Be fucking kind. It's not weak to be kind. Like, you have it in you, I promise.
If, look, for all of us aspiring comedians or just creatives out there, what would be some of the biggest lessons that you would want to share? Things that you've learned that have been most impactful in your life?
Say yes to the projects that like light your body on fire. Oh, that means you have to do it. You have to, like, and not necessarily every good idea that's going to be amazing for you is going to light you on fire, but like really understanding what like a full body yes is to a project. Because I said yes. When the show got big, everybody wanted to like collab, and I was like, yeah, of course. Oh my God, yeah, you want to collab? Okay. And I was just spreading myself too thin. And then no is such a sexy word in creativity. And so, just really searching for things that your body is smarter than your mind. That's something I realized. Like, when I don't know if I want to do something or not, I just like tune into my body. I'm like, oh no, I don't. So that's a really big one. And seeking out art, like I consume art of all fields. My boyfriend's a musician, so I love watching him play, but then going to his colleagues' music shows. Like, I love good art. It really keeps me alive.
Love that.
Yeah.
Listen to your body.
Yes.
Honor your body.
Body keeps the score, baby. Wish it didn't. That's why I smoke weed.
Awesome. On that note, thank you so much for joining
Thanks
us.
for having
tonight.
me.
So
And
great to have you.
props to you guys for coming and you for doing this.
Yeah.
This is a like a only in New York kind of like space and an event. And like, this is great. This is fucking great. So thank you
Thank
for
you so
hosting
much.
this.
Give it up for Christina, everybody.
Thanks, guys.